this concept that if you can envision a goal, an outcome, a preferred future, and if you can really get clear on what it is you want to accomplish. And this transcends business. This is true in personal fitness. This can be true of your marriage. This can be true in any arena of life. If you can really nail down a goal and envision what it is, maybe fitness is a great tangible example for this. If you look at it and you go, okay, I want to lose 20 pounds in the next 6 months. Strategic inevitability is all about then taking that goal and reverse engineering it into the series of necessary steps that you would need to take.
Welcome to Adapt or Die Transformative Leadership Conversations. This is the show where I talk to top leaders and we unpack those pivotal moments that force them to either pivot or to perish. My name is Andreas Pedersen. I'm a former tech CEO that turned leadership coach, and I'm the founder of Leaders Adapt. Welcome so much to the show.
Thanks so much, Andreas. It's exciting to be here. Hearing you read that back, I'm going, wow, what an exciting season that was, and one that I do not want to relive, but we learned a ton along the way.
The hard things in life, it first is a wound, then it becomes a scar, but a great leader turns it into a muscle. And I have a feeling we're going to talk about how you did that here today.
Come on. That's so, I should be writing that down. That's so good.
So take us through that moment back in 2020. Everything is shutting down. What is happening inside of your agency? What is happening inside of your head? Tell me how those discussions happened. What's going on? Who's in the room? What's happening?
Well, anyone who's listening who was an entrepreneur through that season, especially March 2020, probably remembers exactly what that felt like. And there's nothing that prepares you or can equip you for that. There's no course in business school that prepares you for a global pandemic. And more than that, a lockdown. And so for us as an agency, our weapon of choice is film, and, video storytelling is the lifeblood and the essence of so much of what we do in our client work. And all of a sudden, March 2020 rolls around, and within 48 hours, my brother, who's my business partner and really runs our film studio, he and I were on the phone with all of our clients, and just one after another, the response was, "Hey, sorry, we have to push pause. We have to push pause. We have to push pause." We heard that on repeat, and that kind of existential dread starts to just sink in, and you go, "What does this mean?" And so, in 48 hours, we saw all of our existing revenue and current projects basically be put on hold. And not only that, we saw our pipeline for the next 6 months just evaporate in a matter of 24 hours. Our saving grace was that we had two large clients that were in healthcare. And so they basically said, "Hey, look, we'll take as much of your horsepower as you can give us." And that was fantastic. But on the film side, I mean, we had a full slate of film projects that all of a sudden were not there. And then we had a film team that we needed to figure out what we were going to do with. And so, our culture as an agency, and just our agency in general, our mantra, our internal kind of true north is amplify human flourishing. And when we were faced with that decision of whether or not we lay off our film team, we just couldn't stomach it. We couldn't bring ourselves to do that. We've always been so people first. And so my brother and I just kind of sat together and we said, we're going to do everything we need to do to keep this team together. And so if that means not paying ourselves or setting our cash reserves on fire, like whatever we have to do, we're going to do it. And as we were figuring out how we were going to navigate this, once we made the decision that we were going to keep our team and that we weren't going to lay anybody off, they were still sitting around and had really nothing to do because all of our projects were on hold. And so that was not a really healthy dynamic either. And my brother woke up one morning and he just had this concept. In fact, he almost had the script almost like downloaded in his mind. And he woke up, and I remember this frantic phone call, and he said, "Graeme, I think I've got something here." And half an hour later, he sends me an email with this kind of half drafted script of something. And I remember reading the email and I'm going, I don't even know what this is. But it was a letter to COVID-19, and the concept immediately clicked for me, and I'm going, wow, this is incredible.
Brilliant.
And, I think at the time, Italy was in lockdowns, and they had been in lockdowns for more than 60 days. And there was just this overwhelming kind of creeping hopelessness that seemed like it was dominating everything on a global level. And I remember thinking about people in Italy. This is when you were seeing the viral videos of people on their balconies kind of talking to each other. You remember that? And so we kind of thought, like, what can we do? Like as a film studio and as a storytelling agency, what can we do in this moment that would be helpful, that would be productive? How can we continue to do what we've always been about, which is amplify human flourishing at a moment of absolute critical need? And then how can we practically keep our film team busy and occupied so that they're not panicking and freaking out about what this means for them as well? And so my brother had this script. He brought it to the team and he said, "Hey, I think we need to make this. I think we need to create this love letter to humanity, this kind of anthem of hope in a desperate time." And so we worked together with our whole team. It was kind of all hands on deck, and we refined this script down to something that we felt was really genuine. It was really authentic to us. And in fact, it's actually, if I go back and I rewatch it and I look at the script, even post COVID, it still rings so true because it's really about human resilience. It's really about, you know, the human spirit, and we've survived far worse. And that was kind of this anthem of hope, but also it was this kind of like, fist in the face of COVID and saying, you will not defeat us. We have been through far worse, and humans are resilient. We will bounce back. We will sort this out. And, we had zero expectation for it. We had to produce this, and this is one of the challenges. When we talk about challenges, we had to figure out how to produce this and film it without being able to go anywhere. And so we were fully locked down. We couldn't go anywhere to film. We couldn't hire talent. We couldn't do anything. So we basically took the script. We called a lot of our previous clients asking for permission to use archive footage, and we pieced this together using, available kind of public footage as well as client footage from our archives. And we pieced it together. And I remember feeling like, okay, who's going to be the voice of this thing? Because the delivery on this script is going to matter. And initially we thought it was going to have to be an old man with kind of a grovelly voice that was going to have this kind of like Morgan Freeman kind of vibe that was going to be able to give this with, this kind of gravitas and this sense of, a rallying cry from someone who's seen it all and who's survived the impossible. And I think, went through 98 different voice actor auditions, and we just couldn't find that magic that we were looking for. And it wasn't until we got really just discouraged and frustrated with that process that my brother, sitting in his basement, called his 7-year-old daughter over, and he just grabbed a mic, slid it over, hit record, and her name's Ellie. And he said, "Hey, Elle, can you just read this?" And, she could barely read, and he kind of fed her the line, and he recorded it, and she just kind of read that initial line, "Dear COVID-19." And right there, that was it. And we knew that that was going to be the magic, the innocence of a child, this kind of, really optimistic, hopeful voice. And so, if you look at the video now, it's my 7-year-old niece who's on camera, and we were able to film with her in my brother's basement, and she
I
became
saw
the
it.
voice. Yeah, she became the voice of the piece. And so, I think what was really interesting is once we felt like it was finished, um, we had a team meeting. We all watched it together. We all kind of, cheered and cried. And then I remember it was this like, it felt like a sacred moment in a lot of ways. We just kind of released it into the world. We hit publish, kind of on Zoom together. And we just all said, hey, whatever happens with this, we don't know. We have no expectation. We just want this to be an anthem of hope for whoever needs it right now. And we hit publish, and within minutes, we were all of a sudden just seeing boom, 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 like messages coming from all over the place. This thing was just being shared, and all of a sudden it took off, and it became bigger than us in that moment. And, I think one of my favorite moments in the aftermath and the days following that was getting DMs from people in Italy who had been in lockdown for 60 plus days who were saying, hey,
Wow.
seeing this has given me the courage to continue and want to kind of, fight through this no matter what comes on the other end of it. And so the next few weeks were just a blur. I mean, this went viral, was shared tens of thousands of times across lots of different channels. And then all of a sudden we just kind of started, riding this wave of virality and in a way that we never had before. And so that was kind of the moment. That was the response. You can imagine it was incredibly exciting and invigorating for our team. Like for our team, we just felt like we had done something really important in a moment where the world needed something like that. And it speaks to the power of story. It speaks to the power of the right message to the right person at the right time and what that can mean and the impact that that can have. You know, I'll say this too. We had almost zero expectation on what this would do for the business. But the peripheral benefit of this was that all of a sudden we started getting these inbound inquiries from people all over the place that had seen a video and said, hey, I saw that. It really moved me. I've got this project I've been thinking about. I'm looking for a film studio that can help tell this story. And so that was really the beginning of a resurgence for us. And I don't want to say that it saved our business, but I think, there's a real thread in that story that if it wasn't for that moment and for us doing that, I don't know that we'd be where we are today.
And these moments, and I love this story, by the way. This is this is perfect. Like, you have to adapt or you die, basically. And for the listeners, before I sort of grill him a little bit on the emotional side of this, going through it, I do want to hear, you said, I'm not sure you said it, but this ended up getting awards as well, right? This video you did?
Yeah, I mean, that was completely unexpected. So all of a sudden, we're starting to get emails from, film festivals in LA and New York and Glasgow. And so we were being nominated for short film awards. I mean, it was about a 3.5 minute short film. And so, yeah, I think won 4 or 5 awards when all was said and done from these very well-respected, prestigious film festivals. And so it really put us on the map in a new way. And, now we've got a docuseries on Prime, and we're pitching projects to Netflix, and we're now starting to get into much bigger, like multiple 7-figure documentary film projects. And I think this really paved the way for that. It opened up a lot of opportunities and conversations, and it gave us a lot of confidence and credibility as a studio as well.
Congratulations. But let's dive in a little bit on your leadership here. And first of all, I'm going to ask a question like this. COVID, you talk about it like COVID forced this to happen. And sometimes I see leaders that are just waiting to sort of almost be at that pivotal moment before they decide to actually sit down and try to do something different. What did you learn from this? And how will you approach it differently? Because I assume if you have to reinvent yourself, you won't wait for another COVID to happen. Walk me through some of the lessons you have learned here.
Yeah, there's so many. And yes, we're not sitting around waiting for another global crisis to do something remarkable. Here's the reality. I think the biggest lesson for us was, as a young agency, we're constantly creating things that have a client attached to it. And so the client is coming to us saying, we've got this project, we've got this need, we've got this campaign, we're, rebranding, whatever it might be. And so all of our video projects leading up to that moment were always driven by a client. And this is the first time that we as a team actually stopped and created something ourselves, that we had commissioned ourselves and told a story that we wanted to tell because we felt like it mattered. And I think that was the unlock. That was the lesson for us that, yes, we have this, kind of mission to serve nonprofit clients, and that's what we do as our core service and as our business. But it also taught us that we're storytellers, and we've got the ability to, think of a concept and create something that really impacts the lives of people and that can actually drive business results for us as well. And so that really paved the way for us launching our film studio and getting into long form, kind of documentary style content where we are now coming up with concepts. We are now pitching those concepts to investors, and we're now bringing this to streaming, because I think that was the unlock was, wait a minute, we don't have to have a client who's paying the bill, who's telling us how it should be, and who's telling us, no, I don't like that edit, or, you know what? And that's one of the, core frustrations as an agency, is that when you work with a client, they might not see the creative vision, or they're maybe a bit more risk averse than you want them to be. And something that could have been really great and bold and beautiful ends up being just kind of soft and safe. And so that ushered in a new era for us of really kind of betting on our own talent and believing in our own abilities to tell stories. And that's now translated into us, coming up with our own concepts for documentary films. And so now more and more, we are taking concepts that we've developed and pitching those to clients and saying, hey, we've got this concept that we think would be really great for you. Here's what it looks like. Is that something that would be of interest to you? Or we're taking it to investors or to streaming services and asking for funding to be able to build those things. So it's been a really fundamental pivot for us in terms of the way that we think about the creative approach and the creative process, and not always needing to just wait for a client to come to you with an idea.
Tell me a little bit about how you handle risk and fear today versus pre all of these things happening.
Risk and fear. I mean, as an entrepreneur, those are sort of just native languages, right? And you've always got a certain level of risk that you're navigating, and fear. This was on a whole new level. I think it taught us a lot. Like you said, you get the wound and then you build the scar and then the muscle builds on top of that. There are times where my brother and I faced adversity in business, whether it's with our core business or any of our portfolio companies. Just recently, the one of our portfolio companies is a tiny home builder, and 18 of our 25 builds for 2025 was going from Canada to the US, and the tariffs came in, and there was going to be a 25% tariff on all of our builds. And so all of a sudden we were faced with this reality of, 18 of our 25 builds um, might disappear overnight with this. And, I remember looking at my brother, and he and I talking about this and kind of going, we've been here before. We've had our backs up against the wall. We know exactly, what we can control and what we can't. And so I think that's one of the things that we've really learned is don't spend time spiraling and spinning your wheels over things that you have no control over, but really get laser focused on the things that you can impact, that you can influence, and you do have control over. And then use those things if you need to pivot. We learned a lot about speed as well. I think that's one of the lessons that we learned is don't overthink it. It's better to just kind of create and publish and not overthink, especially when you don't have the luxury of time to be able to do that. So there's a lot of lessons that we're now taking with us in our leadership. I think it's changed. Fear, there's a line in the video that we reference often. And so that Dear COVID-19 piece, there's a line in the script that says we will run into our fear and give it its name. And we talk about that all the time of like, there's something powerful about seeing fear coming, feeling it maybe internally, but just being willing to look at it and run directly into it and give it its name. And it's often not as scary as you think it is. And, Mark, my brother, he and I talk a lot about paper giants and this idea of like, it just looks like this daunting thing that you're never going to be able to overcome. But once you name it and run at it, usually it's just a paper giant and you blow right through it and you find yourself on the other side much stronger for it.
You're dropping gold here. And for any listeners out there, if you're an early entrepreneur and you haven't done it before, please take notes here, because what we are saying here is you will never be able to truly define and think your way through it. You just have to do it. And you have to take one step, and constantly keep talking about it, extrovert what you're thinking. And I don't know how many times, Graeme, I tell entrepreneurs, do not solve problems in the past. You solve them in the future. Like so many people get stuck looping and anxiety and worrying instead of just doing. And by doing, the picture will become clear for them.
Mm-hmm.
But if they become stagnant, they will be a self-fulfilling prophecy of failure.
Well, I don't know that that's ever been more true. Like, even just the title of the podcast, Adapt or Die, that could be a mantra for the next 5 to 10 years. Like when you look at the rate of change and the converging of 4 to 6 kind of landmark technologies on the horizon and what this means for society at large, what it means for businesses. I mean, we're having that conversation internally now as a creative agency that does design and websites and film and branding. We're going, do we still exist in 3 years? Like, is there a need when anybody can speak into an AI tool and tell them what it wants and just kind of have a bunch of AI agents create this? Do we still exist? Is there still a need for what we do? So we're really wrestling with that intensely. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, you can't solve problems in the rearview mirror, especially when these are things that nobody's ever faced before. No one has ever faced the onslaught of, hyperintelligence and what it means. I mean, I don't know when this is airing, but I was just watching Elon Musk and the team at the release of Grok 4 yesterday, and them talking about Grok 4 being smarter than a graduate level PhD student or PhD graduate in every discipline imaginable. And like, nobody has ever lived in a world where that is the reality. And so what does it mean for us? And I think as entrepreneurs, like, there are opportunities around every corner, but there are also risks and dangers. And I think that's where just, that forward thinking and being willing to lean in and embrace what's coming and be courageous and bold is going to absolutely be necessary. I think that's going to be the difference between the companies that thrive and the ones that fall behind, is the ability to adapt. And I think that's such a relevant conversation for today.
Thank you for saying that. And I can tell you there are a lot of people I talk to, and some of them are listeners, and they look for risks, they look for the negative. But every time, and even the way you speak about it, a risk is an opportunity. A risk will always open a door in another area. Change is like constant. We know that. And the more you fear it, the longer it will take before you have a solution. The other thing I want to tell you, and I don't want to self-promote here. So I'm a tech CEO, a tech founder. I worked with AI from 2016. We started the whole let's hire our own PhDs to let's develop our own models to let's train models. And we were in video back then before. I mean, we're not just talking large language models here. We were talking like heavy video, petabytes of data on a monthly basis. And I lived this shift. And I can tell you, even originally as a software engineer, and I think I understand most things technology, I can't comprehend AI. Like, I really can't. And I have to realize that I completely shifted my mindset during the last 6-7 years. And you have to shift it to curiosity. And that's a universal rule I recommend any entrepreneur to do. Way more curiosity, ask more questions. You don't have the answers. And interestingly enough, now I want to say for the last 2 to 4 months, I actually have had several agencies within digital marketing agencies reach out to me and ask if I want to help them with their AI strategy and their transformation. I'm actually working with a few right now. So, and we didn't prep this before the call, so I might use this as in the end of the show, we'll do a little bit quick coaching. Maybe we'll jump into this as a topic, but I'm fascinated. Will you be around 3 years from now? Absolutely. Will the world be different within marketing and digital agencies? 100% it will be different. Efficiency, I think, is the first wave. I've seen some agencies that just refuse to pivot in and lean in on AI. They reject it because it struggles with the creativity. The agencies that do realize they can do 2-3 times as much within the same time frame. But we can go off on a tangent about that for probably an hour.
No, but you said something in there that I think is really profound. So, AI aside, curiosity as the bleeding edge of how you lean into this. And I think what we found is that the questions we're asking ourselves are different, and they have to be, because the world we're heading into is different. And so we're having to ask ourselves new questions and different questions, and we're having to really open the possibilities. And our director of operations, he's been in agency for over a decade, and he keeps saying this. He's like, I see what's coming. I understand that we have to pivot. We're going to have to adjust and adapt, but it makes me sad. And I'm wrestling with that. I feel this tension of these things. But in the midst of that, we're asking ourselves new questions. And one of those questions is, what will be more valuable in an AI future than it is today? And how can we lean into those things? Where are the areas? So within our portfolio company, we're asking that question too and going, what will be more scarce? What will be more valuable? And what are we advising our clients to do as well on the agency side? And so one of the things that, is a fundamental thesis we're leaning into now is that I think the organizations and companies that are going to win in an AI future are the ones that become the most human. And so the race now is going to be towards human. And what does that even mean? As a e-commerce direct consumer company, I didn't know, but we're wrestling with that with curiosity and going, okay, I think humanity wins at the end of the day, and the companies that can find the ways to demonstrate the greatest level of human touch and human connectivity within their business, I think are really going to thrive at the end of the day. And then on the portfolio company side, we're talking about building micro resorts and experiences in nature away from the noise of all of the digital connectivity as well. And those are the things that we're going. I think those are going to become the most sought after, necessary human experiences that, are going to see a mass adoption where people are flocking towards those things as well. So we're thinking about it, yes, in a digital sense, but also we're thinking about it in, these kind of analog businesses that maybe are going to have a heyday in the future as well.
Beautiful. I will just add one thing and then we'll move on to the next topic. People's acceptance levels of AI and AI produced things, they were at I will not accept it level, very high threshold to break through. Those barriers are slowly fading away. And I will just add upon what you said, the more human connections you can do and the more real it feels, the quicker people will accept them. With that said, the marker, the threshold will keep changing. And I see companies that we will do things for like we always have done them without AI, they are now doing AI. So for video and audio and written text. So it's changing so quick just within
Mm-hmm.
2 years. I want to change the conversation a little bit. Just before we started the podcast recording here, you mentioned to me that you have sort of discovered a pattern of storytelling, a pattern that you're using within your own, or not, not only within storytelling, but just a whole pattern. And you were kind of saying, like, I'm trying to remember what it was called, strategic. What was the name of the
Mm-hmm.
framework you had developed?
Strategic inevitability. So it's a
Tell,
mouthful. Yeah.
talk us through what that is and what the value of it is.
Yeah, that's something that's really emerged for me in the last year. And it was one of those things I started thinking about on a personal level and then started applying it to our client work. And, over time started to build a framework. Now, for about 2 years now, we've been doing these strategy sprints with clients where it's basically a 1 day workshop where, either virtually or in person, we get in a room together and we map out the next 12 months of an organization's marketing and strategy. And we found that in a 1 day session like that, we can basically accomplish what most organizations spin their wheels and do over the course of 3 months. And we can kind of condense, 3 months worth of like wrestling with what they're going to do into a 1 day session. It's been really profound, really effective. It wasn't until I started layering that and some of the methodology of what we did in those sprints with this idea of strategic inevitability that the magic really started to happen. And I think I said this to you before we started recording. It was one of those concepts to me that felt too simple to be impactful. And I just became obsessed with this idea of inevitability. And there's a lot of people that I follow or books that I've read, and this concept of making something inevitable became really compelling to me. And, I started to think about it, and then build this framework kind of emerged. And it's a collection of lots of different tools and pieces that I've gathered over the years. But at its core, strategic inevitability is really this concept that if you can envision a goal, an outcome, a preferred future, and if you can really get clear on what it is you want to accomplish. And this transcends business. This is true in personal fitness. This can be true of your marriage. This can be true in any arena of life. If you can really nail down a goal and envision what it is, maybe fitness is a great tangible example for this. If you look at it and you go, okay, I want to lose 20 pounds in the next 6 months. Strategic inevitability is all about then taking that goal and reverse engineering it into the series of necessary steps that you would need to take and the things that you would need to execute on a consistent basis in order for that outcome to become inevitable. And I started wondering about whether or not this was something we could apply to our client work and in a business context. And so we then have built this 4-part framework that walks our clients through exactly that. And so the first step in the framework is called envision. And this is where we get really crystal clear on, the goals, the objectives, the outcomes. And we try and frame it into a 12-month window. And I'm more and more passionate about that than ever, just because of what we talked about. Whenever we're in conversations with clients about a 3-year strategic plan, I look at the rate of change and how fast the world is moving, and I'm going, I don't think anybody has any clue what the world is going to look like in 3 years. So let's look at this through a 12-month time frame. And so we start with that envision step, which is where we get really crystal clear. I call it painting the target on the bullseye. Once we are really clear and have alignment around what the bullseye is, then we move to the next step, which is explore. And this is where, and there's a lot of kind of theory behind this, but the idea is that out of a multitude of options, the good ones really rise to the top and are much easier to identify. When you can compare and contrast one idea against another, and especially within the context of lots of different ideas, you can pretty quickly start to see which ones have value and which ones don't. And so the explore idea is really just a creative brainstorm where we start to then, with our clients, we go through a process of brainstorming all the different ways that we could go about accomplishing the goal that we've just defined. Once we've got 30, 40 options on the table, we move to the third step in the process, which is eliminate. And this is about what we call ruthless prioritization. And most leaders and
I
most
love it. Sorry for
organizations.
interrupting. I love that
Mm,
ruthless prioritization. I just want
yeah,
to underline that word.
I feel
More
like I
people
stole
need to
that
do
from,
it.
yeah, I feel like I stole that from Alex Hormozy, but it's just this like pervasive truth, that um, the organizations that are best at prioritization tend to thrive. I actually define strategy really just as ruthless prioritization. It's what do you say yes to, and what are the right things to say yes to versus what do you say no to. And most organizations, especially the clients that we work with, have far more that they're trying to accomplish than they have capacity for. And so then you have to prioritize, and the effectiveness of your prioritization determines the effectiveness of, the outcomes and the quality of the outcomes that you're generating and producing as well. So the third part is actually where it really gets difficult, and this is where it often can get tense in the room because I've found that leaders and organizations are really bad at being willing to say this matters more than this. And it's the willingness to say, yes, that matters most, or that matters more, and this matters less, that actually drives strategy and drives results. And so we've got a number of exercises that we do that force our clients in a very uncomfortable way to say, you only get one thing. If you could, of the 30 things that we brainstormed, if you could only choose one that would most strategically move you towards the objective and the goal that you have defined, which one would it be? You only get one, and we don't let them off the hook. And so this is this kind of ruthless prioritization process. And then once we've got the first one, then we go to the next tier in our pyramid. Okay, so what's the second one and what's the third one? And we go through that and we identify priorities in sequence like that. And we continue to go until we feel like we've maxed out the organization's capacity and their capabilities, when it comes to time, budget, resources, talent, and all of those other things. And then we anchor a plan to their capabilities. And so that's kind of the third part of the framework, is this like really collaborative wrestling with it. But at the end, we end up with this prioritized sequence and what we call our priority pyramid. We end up with this pyramid filled with priorities that are kind of itemized that way. And then the last part of the framework is execute. And this is where we take each of those priorities in the pyramid and we go through an execution framework and we build an execution plan that's very detailed. And it's basically, who's responsible, who's accountable, who's consulted, who's informed, what resources are going to be needed, what external resources, what internal resources, how long is this going to take, what's the expected cost of completion. All of those things come into the mix. But yeah, we've just seen this be like an incredibly impactful framework. We use it internally on ourselves. I use it in my personal life. I use it with my kids. I use it in every aspect of my life. And that envision, explore, eliminate, execute framework has just never failed us. So yeah, I would highly encourage entrepreneurs to lean into something like that.
That's a masterclass in itself. The last few minutes, for all the listeners, seriously, that's a masterclass. People pay tens of thousands of dollars to get that breakdown that you just gave us. I love everything you said there. And I want to underline, when you, who have done business for so many years and have helped so many startups, once you have distilled it down to something that you labeled as simple, and you were kind of like, should it be this simple? That's when it's great. Do not underestimate the effort has gone in to be able for you to be able to articulate it with such clarity. Most people that haven't lived it, that haven't lived through the hard times, that haven't done it over and over again, for them, it might be complex, but you manage to convey it in a very simple way. I really hope you do something more with that. And the steps are very, how do I say, entrepreneurial, simple. And it's what you say no to that makes you successful, not what you say yes to. And so many leaders, they sit in that meeting where you have to do ruthless prioritization, and they don't say how they prioritize. The risk averse will prioritize on what costs more or what costs less, and the visionaries will prioritize the things that gets the home run, not caring about the costs. And leading the team through that conversation, like don't underestimate either, Graeme, your facilitation capability and you as a consultant. Those conversations are not easy. I've been in them, I facilitated them, and it requires a very senior, experienced person to be able to handle that. So don't underestimate the simplicity of what you have created and the beautiful part of it.
I'll maybe drop this really quick too, just as another nugget. Like within each of the pieces of the framework, those 4 steps, there are frameworks and exercises within each one.
Hmm.
The prioritization framework that we use is what we call LICE, LICE. And so we evaluate items based on their leverage that can be applied to them, the impact that we believe it's going to have towards the goal that we've identified, the confidence that we have in the ability to execute and accomplish that, and then the execution required. And so that's one of the things that we're able to do is, and so that's just maybe another piece that layers on to the envision, explore, eliminate, execute is, looking for things that have high leverage, looking for things that you believe are the highest impact activities and that you've got confidence that you can actually accomplish them. And then the ease of execution is the other one.
Gold, absolutely gold. Are you writing all these things on a website, blogs, or this is just your secret formula that you use? So anyone listening here and they want to work with you, they should just reach out to you, I assume. But before we
Yeah.
sort of wrap up here, or I actually want to hear the answer to that. Have you written this down anywhere, or you're still working through this?
So I've been talking about this on podcasts. I will, speak about this at conferences. We do this in our sprints with our clients. We walk through this process, and I was mentioning earlier, I've been encouraged to write a book, and I think if I was to write anything, it would probably be in this vein. And so, I'm starting to do a lot more posting on LinkedIn and kind of blogging about the lessons that we're learning and these frameworks as well. There's also been talk of a digital course and the ability to, because not every client is going to spend a full day with us and incur the cost of doing that. And so I've been wondering, can we package this up into a video course that is more of a DIY that, anybody could take this and take the exercises. It would come with a full download of all the exercises and the instructions they need to run this on their own, as well as the instruction to go with it.
The answer to that question is yes, you can, and
Mhm.
you won't know until you do it, right?
Yeah, that's right.
But anyway, let's go into a quick lightning round. I'll ask you a couple of quick questions. Very few words answers. First thing that comes to your mind, unfiltered, not scripted. Are you ready?
Got it. I'm ready.
What's one phrase that captures your leadership style?
Oof. Empathetic imagination.
Oh, beautiful. Favorite piece of storytelling advice you always return to?
Whoever tells the best story wins.
What's a non-for-profit or creative campaign you wish that you made?
One of our creative director just shared this to our team yesterday, and it's a new Polaroid campaign that is all about human connection over digital engagement. Go check it out.
Oh. What's one book you would recommend to any founder?
Probably Buy Back Your Time by Dan Martell.
It's a really good one. I agree with you. Most surprising lesson you learned from building something with your brother?
Oof. We made a pact that we would be brothers first before we were entrepreneurs.
Oh, beautiful. Graeme, thank you so much for showing us and sharing all your amazing story. You are an amazing entrepreneur. Your lessons have been extremely valuable for the listeners.
Mm-hmm.
I guarantee you this is one of those episodes where I will get text messages asking for your contact information. And if I do, how can people find you? How can they reach out to you?
Yeah, easiest way is to find our website. So it's anthemcreative.ca. So we are in Canada, so it's .ca, not .com. So anthemcreative.ca. And then LinkedIn is a place that I'm active and love to connect with people as well. So Graeme Watt, my name is spelled a little funky. So it's GraemeWatt. And you can find me on LinkedIn there.
Thank you so much for joining Adapt or Die today. I want to thank all the listeners as well. This was a really good episode. So much nuggets, so much mini mastermind conversations. I will for sure listen to this myself as well the day we launch it. If you like today's conversation, I would really appreciate if you leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcast. You just search for Adapt or Die and you will find the show there. You can also follow us on Spotify. Just search for, again, Adapt or Die Podcast. Please remember, everyone, that in leadership, we adapt and thrive, or we don't survive. Until next time.